Hi, my name is Dr. Matthew Geiger. I teach percussion here at East Tennessee State University in Johnson City, Tennessee. And I'm also a member of the Pedagogy Committee for the Vibraphone Project, an organization devoted to celebrating this instrument as it turns the corner on 100 years of being in production. Today's short, brief 30-minute clinic is going to talk about just the fundamentals of this instrument, how to approach it, how to play it, how to use some of the more advanced techniques. And so hopefully you can leave this clinic with some of those questions answered that you might have about how to play this. But if not, or if you have any other questions that come up throughout this clinic, please write those down in the chat window here in the YouTube live video so that I can see those and answer those as soon as this clinic is over. As soon as we're done, I'll switch over to my computer and I'll sit down and answer some of those questions that come up throughout the clinic. So if they come up in the clinic, please write them down and I'll answer them as soon as we're done. I hope you enjoy. So today, what I want to do is just talk through some of the fundamentals of the vibraphone itself as an instrument. And so if you're somebody who's played a lot of keyboard instruments and maybe you've never played a lot of vibraphone, or you're somebody who's played no keyboard instruments and you're kind of terrified of any of them, either way, this is a great start to learn what some of the basics are to get onto this instrument. Going through some of the categories as simple as getting started setting up at the instrument, standing at the instrument, going through some easy exercises that you can do using simple scales and patterns, getting all the way through to some of the mallet dampening skills and even some Formalic techniques that can help you start getting moved in the right direction for some vibraphone technique. Like I said, I'm going to get started with simply just approaching this instrument. I'm going to start with just 2 mallets. I don't need 4 mallets. That just makes things more complicated. So I'm going to start with just 2 mallets, And a lot of times this instrument becomes really petrifying, mostly because it's got this pedal down here. And so if I'm somebody who's a little nervous about just dealing with sustain and controlling that sustain, I think what I'm going to try and do is eliminate the pedal for a little bit. And so some of the first things that I'm going to do, I'm just going to start by playing this instrument without the pedal and get used to and comfortable with the feel and the reaction of these bars as opposed to some of the other instruments. Again, if I played snare drum or things like that and I'm used to an instrument that rebounds really aggressively, awesome, that's going to be a little bit different here on a vibraphone with metal keys. Similarly, the rebound is going to be different if you came up playing xylophone or marimba and you're now asked to play a vibraphone. And so we're going to try and set up on this instrument just like we would any other keyboard or snare drum instrument and get ourselves comfortable behind the instrument. Relax our shoulders, relax our arms to the side, and then from our elbows we'll pivot up to I go to about 90 degrees and then I drop down to where it's comfortable for me. Every single person's going to be different, and so your arm length is going to be different than the next person, so there's no end-all be-all setup. If you have a height adjustable vibraphone, at that point you could set up to that instrument and then raise or lower the vibraphone. Key important element, when you raise and lower a vibraphone, make sure that you loosen the pedal so that it doesn't bend or break as you raise and lower this instrument. It's an easy way to break a very nice instrument very quickly. So once we have kind of our height set up, we can talk a little bit about the tenets of the grip, or at least a standard matched grip style approach to this instrument. There are hundreds of ways of playing this, and so I'm not going to say that this is the best way or anything like that. All I'm going to say is when I play vibraphone with two mallets, I tend to focus just like I would on a snare drum stick. I have a fulcrum that sits between my thumb and my index finger, and then I let the stick rest in the hand, crossing at about a 45-degree angle, and I use the back fingers to create nice full support. I tend to not play like this so that the mallet wobbles around, but rather I grip with the full mallet, and so that when I play I can get a full sound out of this instrument. You can hear the difference. No back finger support. Full back finger support. And so when I play this instrument, a couple things just like any other keyboard instrument, I need to lift off the keys. If I don't, I tend to just smack down and I get a little bit more of an aggressive sound. Again, let's listen to the two different versions here. Whereas one I'm going to lift up using the grip I just talked about, and one I'm going to just let the mallets just fall straight down. Hopefully you can hear a difference in the amount of attack that we get when we just let the mallets just stick straight down. It's true for most keyboards. There is one advantage to using rattan on this instrument, and that is because we're playing on a metal instrument, metal bars, the rattan will flex and bend. So when I do strike this instrument, it will create a little bit more of a resonant sound as compared to if I were to use just a birch mallet on vibraphone. For that reason, I do recommend often using just rattan mallets on this instrument. However, if you're using birch, totally fine. But you're going to have to work a lot harder to whip back so that you get a little more of that rebound that the rattan mallet shaft will automatically give you. Back to just the grip and standing. So we talked a little bit, very briefly, about holding the mallets. I tend to hold with about 1 inch to 2 inches out the back. I don't like holding rattan mallets out very far back. I also don't like choking up a lot because that takes away the weight. And so because of that, I'll hold with about 1 inch to 2 inches from the back, getting a nice relaxed approach and allowing the mallet weight to do almost all of the work for me. And then when I stand at this instrument, I like to stand with my feet about shoulder width apart. So again, we haven't talked about the pedal just yet, but we're talking about just approaching this instrument. And so instead of starting with a weird angle approach dealing with the pedal or where I'm going to put my foot on the pedal, I'm just going to start the way I normally would behind a snare drum and stand with my feet about shoulder width apart. I want to reiterate, this isn't the only way to play vibraphone. There's hundreds of different ways to do this, and this isn't necessarily the right way. It's just the way that I do things. And so I stand with my feet shoulder width apart, and then at that point I can now take steps to move on this instrument. This is how I generally play any keyboard instrument. Again, you can be used to playing this instrument standing still, and you can reach every part of this instrument. one of the biggest benefits of a vibraphone as opposed to a 5-octave marimba is I can play every part of this instrument from one standard position. However, what I like to do is I like to follow my mallets as I play. Now we'll talk about how that is impacted when I add the vibraphone pedal. But for now, as I'm getting used to just standing behind this instrument and trying to take what I know from other keyboard or drumming instances over to this instrument, I'm going to move a little bit behind this instrument. Maybe just pivoting from my knees and moving my lower body. But I certainly don't want to get used to having to stand completely over here with my feet together or stand over here with my feet together. And so I'm going to centralize my body a little bit and see if I can play the entire range of this instrument using maybe one step in one direction, and if I'm just getting used to just standing here, another step in the other direction. If you're coming from a keyboard instrument, this should feel relatively comfortable and normal to you. Moving with the instrument. And so an easy exercise is either starting with a normal scale or even a chromatic run to just practice going up and down the instrument, taking that step. And I don't want to practice taking a bunch of tiny steps because that doesn't serve me any purpose in any instrument, but rather I want to get used to, okay, can I go across this entire instrument in one step? Hopefully this is something you can do on any instrument, not just vibraphone. So let's try that. Hopefully what you notice is I'm not taking 3 steps, but rather I took kind of one side step a little bit just to get from the lowest end to the highest end of this instrument. It's only 3 octaves. It's only 3 octaves. And so we really don't have a lot of ground that we need to cover, but we do want to be able to play every part of this instrument. Another thing I like to do if you're new to a keyboard instrument is simply take an exercise that you're really comfortable with on snare drum or another instrument and just apply it to one note here. Instead of worrying about playing all of the notes, just pick one. A good example of that would be 16th note timing exercise. I'll just play it on a G. And so on and so forth, getting used to just transferring what you're comfortable with into an area that you might not be so comfortable. That's just to get started. So now what I want to do is introduce the kind of elephant in the room, which is the pedal now. And so now we have to start to think about controlling and dealing with the sustain of this instrument, which is one of the greatest parts of this instrument, but also one of the most difficult things to master and tackle. And there's a variety of different pedals that exist and also different pedaling techniques. And so I'm going to just talk about what works well for me. What I like to do is I'll start with that same body position that I was at before, with my feet shoulder width apart. And then what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to allow my right foot to come forward and put that on the right side of the pedal. So again, as I'm standing, instead of starting with my feet together and just going straight forward, I'm going to keep my feet shoulder width apart a little bit, and then I'm going to bring my foot forward. The reason why has to do with balance. And so if I stand straight still, I'm pretty wobbly. And so it would be easy for someone, although mean, if they came up and just pushed me over. But if I widen my base a little bit, somebody who might come in here and try and push me over might have a little more difficulty, although they could possibly have a lot of success knocking me over, but it'll be a little bit more difficult. Same thing applies for when I'm standing and I put one foot forward in front of the other. Sometimes we end up doing this and just standing here in where our heels are kind of in line or in a track. And again, I'm back to that very wobbly base. And I want to feel very comfortable and confident in my lower body staying in place when I play so that I don't feel like I have to watch which direction my upper body is. And so I'll start with my feet back and I'll just bring my foot forward. Now this positions me pretty well within the lower half of this instrument. That's not to say that if you're playing something exclusively in the upper half, that you could switch and play with your left foot on the pedal. Although being more right foot confident, I'm going to stick with putting my right foot on here. And we'll talk about moving up and down the instrument in a second. And so we've got our foot now kind of planted on the pedal. I'm not going to put my whole foot on the pedal. I'm actually going to use just really my big toe of my foot. Just the big toe to move this. So if you watch the damper bar here, I want you to notice the point at which we move from no pedal to what you might consider half pedaling to what you would consider full pedal off. So again, we have no pedal, and then the bars flatten out to what you would consider a half pedal. And now the pressure's been released on the edge, so now the bars will resonate a little more. And then all the way down to full pedal. What I also want you to see is where the pedal is in comparison to the ground. There should be, if I set my pedal up appropriately, there should be at least an inch or so of distance. Maybe a little less, maybe a little more, depending on your comfort level. If you have too much, your heel or your ankle will start to hurt. And so if you feel tension in the upper part of your ankle, then you're holding this pedal too high, and you may need to lower the pedal a little bit. Going back to the important part here of the pedal is not touching the ground. You can see in this room I'm on concrete. And if I'm in the concert hall, I might be on a nice wood stage or something similar. And so I don't want to hear that sound. And so there are some alternatives. You can put a towel underneath, or you can make sure that there's some foam padding underneath the pedal. But again, that's not the most important reason why we do this. The reason why we do this has to do with no pedal, half pedal, full pedal. And what I want you to notice, again, there should be a lot of room to do full pedal here. That allows me to control every part of this if maybe there's a little bit of a bend in the damper bar. And so I don't need to go all the way down to the ground because this is doing nothing. You can see my foot doing a lot of work. But I'm doing nothing to that. Now you might say, well, why don't you just lower the pedal? I could do that, but again, the pedal's going to hit the ground, or maybe that bar will ring, but a few other bars might not, just because of where the position of the string is in the bar and things like that. Even a vibraphone that's pretty much set up perfectly will still have small little inconsistencies that you can deal with. So going back to that pedal technique, we're going to put our foot forward a little bit, angle it out a little bit, so that we have a wide, confident, firm base. And then when we use the pedal, we're not going to go all the way to the ground, but rather just enough that we clear the bar. And so I really don't have to use a lot of pedal to move the pedal and be able to get a full resonant note that rings. Similarly, on the way up, if I don't use the entire pedal on the way down, I don't have to move the pedal very far at all to clear that note. Listen to the difference. I let the pedal go, but because of the spring motion and action on the bottom of this vibraphone, it takes a second for the pedal to react and the damper bar to go all the way back up. So to make that as quick as possible, that's where I want to keep that pedal motion as small as possible. Quicker pedal motion equates to more connected lines. If I move the pedal slowly, I'm going to have a lot of gaps in the sound. So we talked about setting our body up into this position and getting ready to play and add the pedal. So if you're coming from a keyboard instrument, this should probably be the first thing we're going to start doing. If you're a drummer and you want to get used to playing a keyboard instrument, and this is the first instrument, I hope it's the only one because it's the best. If you're moving into this instrument and now we're ready to start practicing using the pedal, the first thing I like to do, again, is just stick with something you're comfortable with and just use the pedal. And so I'll play that same exact exercise using the pedal, 16th note timing, and I'm just going to pedal the whole thing first. Just getting used to, hey, I've got to hold a pedal down. And now we can start to make it a little more complicated by maybe doing a pedal or a repedal every downbeat. Goal of this is to repedal as quickly as possible and as late as possible to keep the full sustain. Listen to an example where I'll pedal too early. What I hope you notice in that slowed down version is that every last 16th note or 16th note rest is cut short. Every one of those notes before the next bar was already a dry no pedal note. I want to keep every note sustained. I don't want that last note to sound different. And so I'm going to try and pedal in between and as quickly as possible. That's taking an exercise that a lot of drummers would be comfortable with and putting that on this instrument. Let's take something that maybe a keyboard player would be comfortable with. Scales. Yay, scales. Scales are just one of those things we have to do to get better at being comfortable on this instrument, whether it's a certain pattern of scales or anything like that. The nice part about this instrument that I've said before is it's a smaller keyboard. And so I can play the entire range of this instrument in a scale in a very quick amount of time. And so one of the first exercises I like to do on this instrument, if I'm comfortable with my scales, is I'll play all major scales, starting on the lowest note to the highest note. And every time I hit the low or high note, I'll add either a sharp or flat, going through the circle of fifths or the circle of fourths. So here's an example of that, adding flats first. And you'll notice when I get to F sharp instead of F, I'll have to stop on the note underneath it. Let's try a 2-octave version of this, and every time I hit a low or a high note, I'll repedal. And so forth through the major scales. I just wanted to show you kind of how we could switch from the flats to the sharp side. You'll have to drop one note. And so from there, we can extrapolate that to the full range of this instrument, adding just one more octave. The challenge now is, how do I move from the lowest end to the highest end? And this is where there's a number of different ways you can move. Some approach this as simply just pivoting and allowing your body to take care of that. What I like to do is I like to move a little bit more and allow my upper body to get over further to be more accurate, especially if I'm over here for a little while. If I'm playing just one note, I'll just reach over for that. But if I'm playing an entire octave of a scale, I'll try and move over and move back. Let's start that with just using the pedal for the entire scale. There's going to be some difficulty in a minute, but for now, this should at least kind of work. And so now you can see how I move up and down this instrument, covering the entire range, using this sort of back kick side step. Now you might be saying, that works if you're holding the pedal down, but that doesn't work if you're having to re-pedal through all of this. And now I want to take a second and go back and talk through another way of approaching and thinking about using this pedal. We started just by dealing with, okay, let's push it down. Now we have to talk a little bit about where the weight is balanced between the 2 feet. A lot of times we play this instrument like this. Balanced on the back left foot, or if we're using our left foot, back right foot. And so that allows us to use this pedal pretty freely. What that doesn't allow me to do is move at all. And I'm leaning left, and it could add some strain and weight to my left back foot. And so instead, I want to use more of an even balance between my back left foot, staying a little bit more on the ball of the foot than the heel. So again, just a little more on the front side. And then my right side, where I'm going to use the heel to carry the weight. Obviously, I can't use the ball of my right foot because that's what I'm using along with my big toe to use the pedal. And so that balance allows me to stay more relaxed in my lower body so that I'm not putting all of my weight on my back foot. But it also allows me to do more of re-pedaling through all of this. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to re-pedal every 4 notes. And so I can re-pedal and take my steps based on when the pedal is going up and down. So you can kind of see how I'm able to use the pedal even when my left foot is off the ground. A way to practice this and try this is whatever you're used to playing, try doing it with your left foot off the ground. That allows you to see, oh, am I actually using my heel to bear the weight of this right foot? Or am I trying to use either none or all of my right foot to carry my weight? So now I can try that same exercise. And so on and so forth. Now that's obviously not something that I ever want to do permanently, but it does allow me to say, okay, if I ever need to, I can move my lower body without having to impact how I pedal. So I could practice that too. So that's a big entrance into using the pedal and getting comfortable with the way you stand behind this instrument and basically playing this in whatever style you want, whether that's in a contemporary piece for vibraphone or if it's in a jazz piece or in marching band. All of that's the same. Next, I want to move into something a little bit different. I want to talk about mallet dampening, or being able to dampen some of the notes that you play, being able to choose which notes resonate and sustain longer than others. One of the biggest potentials of this instrument is to be able to control that sustain. And so if we play two notes, I can dampen one of those notes. It's really useful if we have four mallets, so I'll grab four mallets. It's really useful if you, say, play a chord and it starts with a crunchy harmony that you can clear out to create something a little more appealing. Great for suspensions and other parts, but it's also great for being able to play a sustaining line and a singular line against that. And so there's a lot of skills that you can develop to be able to work on mallet dampening. And there's all sorts of different types of dampening that can be achieved. Before I go down that, I just want to talk through a little bit of an approach of Formalic Grip. There's a lot of ways of holding four mallets, and no one way is necessarily better or worse than another. I'm going to talk through the Burton technique very quickly, which utilizes the two mallet approach that I talked about, while sticking the outside mallet in between the index and middle finger and the stick in the palm. So again, index and middle finger, stick in the palm, and then the next thing we can do is close that up with our ring finger, and we can create a little bit of a gap between the two hands, or the two sticks, so that the sticks don't necessarily click. Although clicking sticks is just something that happens when you play vibraphone, and that's okay. If it really bugs you, you can either try and develop the technique where you hold the sticks apart, or you can use tennis wrap. Or I'm sure companies now make mallet wrap to make that, make sure the sticks don't click against each other. So without going into exercises and techniques for four mallets, we'll simply move into mallet dampening concepts. The first thing I like to do when I mallet dampen is do a follow the leader type approach. I'm going to take mallet 4 here, and I'm going to play, or mallet 1 depending on your pedagogy. I'm going to take this note, or this mallet, and I'm going to play a scale. I love my scales. I'm going to play a scale, and my other mallet is going to follow and dampen as I play the next note. And that's what I would consider the follow the leader approach. This is a great way to start because each hand is doing their own sort of technique. We're not switching back and forth. And so if I do that again a little quicker, it hopefully creates a more continuous line while also being able to hear each note independently. One other important thing I want to highlight with any mallet dampening, and it starts from the follow the leader approach, is you want to make sure that you don't dampen too early. Similar to reaching the pedal, going all the way down and all the way up, too late or too early, that's going to create a similar issue. If I dampen too early, you'll hear the mallet dampen as well as a gap between the notes, and we don't want that. And so I tend to either dampen right as soon as I strike, or even a little after. And so that way I can get a nice bridge between the two notes, and there might be a little bit of dissonance, but if I move quick enough, you won't hopefully notice that. And so whether I'm using the follow the leader or the next approach, I'm still going to try and dampen right on it or even a little later to make sure the notes connect. And so the next way of playing mallet dampening or approaching mallet dampening would be to alternate, where one note plays and it's going to dampen the same note. This tends to be more difficult because oftentimes when we approach this instrument from a keyboard background, we're used to playing one note and then going to the next note. So if I'm going to play, say, C, A, G, my C is already on the way to G. And especially if you work with younger students and you're just trying to develop a good piston stroke, that can be really counterintuitive to keep it in the same spot and keep it low. We spent and talked about in the very beginning of this clinic that you want to start and practice lifting. Well, if I'm going to dampen the same note, I can't lift. I have to stop it low to be able to dampen. And I don't want to add a lot of energy doing a full stroke back all the way up. And again, if you're used to drumming, this should feel a little more comfortable to you as what you know as a downstroke, where you're simply not going to bring the stick back up. But it's going to stay put, which is a big difference between, say, playing no pedal and dampening each note as you play it. And so this tends to take a little more time. If you're used to, say, learning a piece without dampening, and then you're going to add the dampen later, it actually adds a little bit more of a technical difficulty to it because you're going to have to unlearn some of the muscles that you already learned. And so I actually recommend, if you're doing any mallet dampening, that you use the mallet dampening from the very beginning, even if you're not very good at it, to get used to the muscles of, hey, I got to stop this mallet low and practice dampening right after. And I don't want to do it aggressively, because then you can hear that and it's not ideal. So again, C, A, G. Keeping each note where I played it and then being able to dampen right after. So that's the second type, and a good way to practice that is make up your own solo completely out of time and completely out of key. The rules are simple. Play quarter notes and alternate left and right hand. Try not to get too fancy, and it's okay to be bad. Simple enough to just get used to it and then get comfortable. Notice how I'm only using 2 mallets. I like to get started using 2 before I try and make it a little more complicated using 4. You don't have to hold 4, but that can definitely help with getting more comfortable moving from the basics into a little bit more of a complicated 4 mallet approach. Finally, other ways of doing mallet dampening include the single mallet dampen. So this is really useful, where I'll do sort of a follow the leader. You might call it a slide dampen. I'll do a follow the leader with one hand. And so one exercise that you can use to go from the alternating dampening to the single hand slide dampen is a 1-3-2-4-3-5 pattern exercise. Sounds like this. Simple enough in C. You can do it in all the keys, yay, scales. But I'll start with just alternating the dampening. That's a good way to practice that. Try it in a bunch of different keys. Similarly, I'll take the one hand and try and do both of those exercises we've already done, starting with the single follow the leader scale. And then going back to the pattern. something a little bit more challenging and not necessarily really useful all the time, but that can come in handy if you're playing a chord down here and, say, trying to get a melody to speak out. That way I don't have to bring up the left hand to dampen, but I can practice getting used to that. A few other techniques that don't necessarily employ just the mallets would include using your fingers to dampen. And so if you've got a quick dampening, say, moving from C to B flat down here, let's say I'm going to do this. I can use my pinky to dampen that C as I push across to the B flat. I can also do a similar thing where I'll dampen using my body. So that sort of concludes some of the fundamentals from standing at this instrument to approaching the pedal to approaching mallet dampening and even holding 4 mallets in a very brief way. Hopefully, if you had a question throughout, you put that in the comments, or if you thought of something really quickly and you want to put that in the comments, please do so now so that I can see that when I get over to the computer. I'm going to head over there, see if there's any questions, and hopefully I'll get a chance to answer any of those that you might have. Hi, I just want to thank you again for tuning in to this live clinic. The pre-recorded stuff is all done now, and I'm just going to check and see what sort of questions. Before I do want to thank Aaron Butler for putting this together with the YouTube link and everything like that. He's been really helpful in creating all of this, as well as all the members of the Vibraphone project who have really been supportive of these clinics and the entire work that the Pedagogy Committee have been doing. Again, if you do have any questions, please feel free to include those in the chat. And if we don't get a chance to answer them today, feel free to email me at geigerm@etsu.edu. That's GEIGERM@etsu.edu. I'd be happy to hear from you and any question you might have. Oh, another thing I'd like to mention is that the Vibraphone project is doing a really cool opportunity to have a free lesson with Tony Maselli or David Friedman. More information on that can be found on the Facebook page or the website. So if you're interested in studying with one of those amazing musicians, there's I think a little essay that you have to write or something like that, but check that out. It's a great opportunity for anybody or your students. Highly recommend that. And then on top of that, there is more additional volunteer opportunities for anybody who's interested in helping out with the Vibraphone project. So if you or one of your friends knows and wants to be involved in this and wants to kind of devote time to just celebrating the Vibraphone, I'm sure the Vibraphone project would love to have you. So I'll do one last quick look to see if we have any questions, and it doesn't look like there are any questions. So that will be it for me. I hope that you have a fantastic evening and you enjoy the rest of your summer. Thank you for tuning in.